Hey, all you creeps and geeks. I'm your host, Robert, and today's episode is the final part in my werewolf series. Today, we're talking about the Wolf of Snow Hollow and Werewolves Within. Joining me for this episode is Angel Krause. Angel is the host of the Voices From the Mausoleum YouTube channel, where she talks about all kinds of horror stuff, including movies, books, and video games. Welcome to the show, Angel.
Oh, thanks, Robert. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on.
Yeah.
I've actually been on your show twice now.
Yep.
So,
Twice so far. Yep.
we've been talking for a while about getting you on here to do an episode, and I finally got you on. So,
Yeah. Werewolves. I love werewolves.
werewolves. Me too. Yeah, I'm a big werewolf fan, and
Yeah.
there's just, to me, there's not, I guess, not a lot of really good horror, like a lot of good werewolf movies.
It's true.
And that's what I've been trying to highlight with this series. And
Yeah.
you get to be the final episode for this one. So and
Yeah.
we're talking a couple of nice, fun horror comedies.
Right.
So
Yeah. Which
yeah.
normally is like not my thing, but with the werewolves, like, I was in one of them I had been following for a while, which was the Werewolves Within, and then I kept hearing about Snow Hollow, and so these were both first watches for me
Oh,
for
wow.
this conversation. Okay. So it was exciting.
I'm excited to hear your thoughts on them. So,
Yeah.
but first up, let's find out, what was your first horror movie?
Yeah, so my first horror movie I saw when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and it was the movie Poltergeist.
Okay.
It was kind of like gateway horror for me because it ended up turning into this thing. My sisters like snuck to let me see it. I remember them like getting in trouble for letting me watch it. And it ended up just kind of being, it's still one of my favorite horror movies of all time. It makes my top influential. I have a tattoo of the beast from Poltergeist on my arm.
Oh, wow.
So it's like peak influential, like peak, like it's like a perfect movie. So that was it turned out to not just be my first, but ultimately like a really big love of mine for horror movies too.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. No, I remember seeing it as a kid too.
Yeah.
I saw it. Well, I have vague memories. But
Yeah.
I vaguely remember seeing it when it came out in 1982.
Yeah.
I saw it. I again vaguely remember seeing it at a drive-in. So
Oh, cool. Yeah.
but yeah, that was one of my first. That and The Thing. I believe.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. So are you in the camp of which camp are you in of who directed it? Steven Spielberg or Toby Hooper?
Oh man. I don't know. So like a lot of times when we start talking about horror movies and we start talking about the people who actually are in the movies, we start talking about the people who wrote them, directed them, you start losing Angel, because like I really just watch them as these experiences, and then eventually I'll realize like, oh wait, there's a pattern. These are all done by the same person, and I loved all of these. But it takes like multiple films to get me there. But I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. For the most part, I kind of forget that Toby Hooper was involved. I'm going to be totally honest, which may be like sacrilege, but I do consider it like a Spielberg film, I think. And if they ever were to do anything more with the franchise, I would really prefer he be the one that handle it, or like, like I just think it could be really good if it went in that direction. Right. I forget about Toby. I'm just gonna be totally honest with you. Don't come for me.
Okay. All right. You heard it here, everybody. Go for her. Don't come for me on that one. No, I'm kind of with you on that. Like, I truly believe that Toby Hooper was the one who directed it, but I do think that Spielberg had a pretty heavy influence on it as well.
Yeah.
And not in a bad way. I think what ends up happening with Poltergeist is it's a nice mix of both of them. You get the Spielbergian flair to it, some flavor to it, but it's a Toby Hooper horror movie, so
yeah, I get that. I can see that. Yeah, for sure.
So
yeah.
So that's kind of how I am with it. Like, it feels like a nice mixture of both. So all right. Yeah, well, that being said, let's jump into some werewolf talk. And let's go ahead and start with the Wolf of Snow Hollow. You said you just saw both of these for the first time.
Yep.
So what did you think about this movie overall?
So it took me a little bit to get used to the humor in this one.
Yeah.
Because in order, as far as like how I watched them, I watched Werewolves Within first, and then I watched this one. So that they're very different takes on humor. And so this one took me a little bit to get into the mind of the humor. But once I was in there, I was like in there and I loved it.
Yeah.
I think it was actually really funny, and horror comedies are not really easy sells for me in general. Like I typically I'm just really hard on them. But I actually really enjoyed this one. I mean, I think John's character is like literally me if I were a cop in this situation. Like some of the stuff he says, like when he says to that one deputy where he's like, you should have stayed and got your whatever degree because you're terrible at this. Like I was like, oh my God, that would be me. I loved his character so much. And I thought it was a really fun movie. I think like the only knock I had is I wasn't like a super big fan of the ending. But I thought it was really funny, and I loved the story. It was different. I like small town stuff, so I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, it was a fun movie overall.
Yeah, that's what's interesting about both of these movies too. They're both this like weirdly small town, like in the winter werewolf movies. And so it was I didn't intentionally pair it because of that. They just both happened to come out right around the same time as each other. So I always thought that they would make a good double feature just in that way. But once I rewatched them this time, I was like, oh yeah, they're both set in the snow, both in small towns.
A lot of similarities.
Yeah. So I do agree that the humor on both of these is very different. Werewolves Within is very much more, I think, more broad comedy.
I agree.
Whereas Wolf of Snow Hollow is more kind of awkward comedy, almost kind of like uncomfortable comedy at times.
Oh yeah. I agree.
The stuff that is the stuff that you're laughing at, you're just laughing at because you're just like, this is just awful and weird, you're like you're uncomfortably laughing the whole time. It's just like, no. But it's I like when I first saw this, I actually been hearing about it for a while, and people had been talking about it online, and I'd wanted to see it, and it looked good from the trailers and everything. And I am a sucker for a good horror comedy. We've talked about this before. So that's my that's my bread and butter right there. And it's so when I finally did get to see this, what's interesting is that I entered a random Twitter contest, you like and retweet this tweet thing, and get a copy of the movie and the poster signed by Jim Cummings, and I won. And so that's how I got my copy, and that's how I finally watched it.
That's cool. I don't think I knew that.
So it's really cool. I had the poster up for a while. I just recently took it down to replace it with another one, but I'll put it back up again later. But I did but I really enjoyed this. It's a fun weird little it's very quirky, I would say. That, like we said, that uncomfortable.
You're almost like you're kind of like, oh, like you really shouldn't be saying those things, or you shouldn't be doing those things, but I'm gonna laugh anyway. I know exactly what you mean.
And then and you feel bad, like, and that's the funny thing too, is like you feel bad for Jim Cummings' character throughout the movie, because he's just struggling with all this. Like, he's alcoholic.
So much.
He's got this ex-wife that's kind of a pain in his ass, and he's trying to live up to, like, his dad's like older and should have retired, but he's still the sheriff, and he's trying to take on that role, but he's struggling with it all, and he's still trying to stay sober, and then everything just spirals out of control for him with these werewolf killings, which he's so steadfast about it not being an actual werewolf. He's like, no, it's a man.
It's a man. Yeah.
And and there's a great part where he's just like, I've got to find him. I gotta stop him. I gotta kill. I mean, we gotta bring him to justice.
Bring him to justice.
Yeah.
I like when he's in the car with I forget the character's name, the female deputy though. He's in the car with her and he's like, you think it's a man, right? Like he's starting to kind of question like what, like, because it's so bad. He's like, oh, maybe I should be like rethinking my thoughts. And she's like, yeah, you even have to ask that. And he's like, oh yeah, I mean, but he starts to, it's like gotten so out of control and he's spiraling and he's like, maybe I should consider that it could be like a real werewolf.
Well, I mean, and to be fair, all evidence points to that. And as the audience, we actually see a couple of moments and it is a werewolf, and so, and I gotta say, like, for me, one of the best werewolf designs that I've ever seen in a movie. I love, that's my favorite kind of werewolf, is the humanoid wolf.
Yeah.
And so
so me liking the werewolf design so much is why I didn't like the ending.
Because
when you see him and he stands up, like one of the first shots we get of like the full body, I was like, oh my God, he is stunning. Like he was gorgeous and I was so excited. And so I was super into the design and everything. Like I was like, oh, this is amazing. It looks so good.
Yeah, I wasn't let down by the ending so much. I was a little disappointed. Don't get me wrong, because like we're gonna spoil this, but at the end, it's found out that it's just a man in a wolf suit. It's just a human, in a suit. But he's just this ginormous, super tall dude, and and it's it's amazing. Obviously, I mean, it's a guy in a suit. No matter what, movie.
Yeah, because it didn't look CGI or anything. It definitely
no.
I was thinking, oh, this looks really practical. Well, it was.
It was, yeah. And so, that's what's great. Is it turned out really well. And the couple of times you really see it, especially that later scene where he's attacking the daughter.
Oh yeah, in the car. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sequence is really great too. And that's what I like about this movie too. Like so many movies will cheap out, and I get why they cheap out, don't get me wrong. They'll cheap out on not showing you the werewolf. It's a hint of a face or claws, just the claws or something like that. And I get it. They like, maybe their suit wasn't that great, but this suit was so good. So good. And you see it, and you see it so clearly in a couple of shots, especially that one that you're saying, the first shot where it's all kind of backlit. And he stands fully high and everything, and it just looks so good. It's like, for me, that is like one of the best shots in a movie ever.
It's great. And to be fair, it also, because I feel like a lot of times when they don't show a lot of the monster, they do it because, like you said, it's lower budget. They don't have what it takes to maybe make it look more elevated, and they don't want to ruin the experience, so they leave it hidden. Whereas this shows what you can do with just a suit and really good lighting. Because to me, like, I almost would have questioned, especially like the parts where you can see like the face of it, where like I almost I could have removed myself and not even thought that it was a suit, because it just looked so, like, I don't know. I think that just goes to show you like what you can really do with the way something is filmed, because it was so well done. The wolf design in this was so good.
Yeah. I think, another part of all of this, the small town, the snowiness of everything like that, I think really helped. There's some really gorgeous shots in this movie of just like the mountains and everything, and and both of these movies really, because they both kind of, like we said, they're both kind of in these snowy regions. One set in I believe Wolf of Snow Hollow's in Utah, and then uh Werewolves Within is in Vermont.
Oh,
So
okay.
and so it's two separate areas, but very much,
Yeah.
very snowy, very, very gorgeous looking areas.
Yeah. So pretty.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And so a lot of the cinematography in Wolf of Snow Hollow is really well done.
It
So
is. Yeah.
kudos to whoever his cinematographer was.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but yeah, it's just the the performances were all great. Jim Cummings, I hadn't seen anything of him before this.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, I know he'd done another movie before this, and I'm sure he's been acting in things. But before this movie had come out, I hadn't seen him anything. And then he's in Halloween Kills. Also, he's one of the officers in the flashback to the original Halloween.
I didn't even
Yeah,
realize that.
yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
He's my introduction to him was Wounded Fawn, right? That's the same guy?
No, 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 no,
No?
no. That's
Oh,
Josh Rubin.
oh, Josh Rubin. Never mind then. Never mind then. Yeah, so these were my introductions to him then because I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, he's really good. He pulls off like this like kind of this interesting mix of the kind of the bumbling cop, because he's not really bumbling, but because he's got so much going on, um, he comes off so unhinged at times.
He does. And he plays
And
that build up to it like really well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
it's this descent of his like whole thing into, because he's all this stuff is going on around him. He's trying to hold it all together, and then he fails and slips back into the bottle. And
Yeah.
it's interesting. I don't have that perspective. I've never been an alcoholic, but you can kind of feel like it felt real. Um, it felt
Yeah,
like
it
that's
did.
what
I think, yeah. And
happens to
I
people.
think like sometimes it was funny because like I felt like even though we're watching him kind of fall apart as all this stuff is going on, like some of the things he did and said still felt like reasonable sometimes. Like, so like
Yeah.
when he's getting on to his daughter because she's supposed to be home and in curfew, and she's like, "You're not going to ask if I'm okay." He goes, "No, I'm not going to ask if you're okay because you're supposed to be at home." And I'm thinking, that to me as a parent, I'm like, in the
Yes.
moment, like I care that you're okay, but I can see that you're probably okay and you're not supposed to be here. Like you were
Yeah.
told to do something and you didn't, and now look at the situation. Like, so that part actually made
Exactly.
me laugh probably like too hard because I was like, oh man, that's totally me. Like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not worried about you because you were supposed to be home. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, no, no, no. As a parent, like that's something anybody who has a parent you can empathize with, because it's just like, yeah, you shouldn't have been here. Like you wouldn't be in this position. I wouldn't be in this position if you had just done what you were supposed to do. So
Exactly. And then it would have been some, I mean, of course that means it probably would have been someone else, but yeah, it
true.
was
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was really well done. And then they always say like when you're watching like serial killer stuff, they always talk about how like, serial killers will sometimes like put themselves in the investigation. So like we've
Yes.
technically met the wolf already. We just don't realize
Yes.
that we've met it because it was such a tiny part in a mix of seeing all these other people that we don't see much of anymore, that it just kind of
Right.
like gets like lost in the mix. And then when he goes to his house and I don't know, like this I saw like the sign started to kind of come clear and he's like asking about the daughter, and I'm like, oh my God, like
Yeah.
what's gonna happen? And then I'm still hoping he's gonna like transform into like a real werewolf. But
Right.
he still did a great job, and it is almost scarier, right? That it's like a real
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Especially like, yeah, but when we get that first shot of him in the suit, I was like, oh my God, it just was, I wasn't expecting that.
No, and I think that's another thing that the movie does really well is like, for the whole movie, us as an audience, we've already seen the wolf a couple of times, and
Yep.
we are like, no, that's a wolf, dude. Like, get
It has to
stop
be.
thinking it's a guy and start thinking it's a werewolf. This is beyond what you know, dude. And then everything falls apart, and then he's vindicated because it does turn out to
It's
be a
like, oh,
guy.
thank God it's not a werewolf.
Yeah. He's like, it is a dude, yay.
Yes.
And but yeah, no, yeah, I wasn't as disappointed by that fact that
Yeah.
that he wasn't a werewolf, because it was just
Yeah.
like, oh, that's a neat twist, you
It's
know.
unique. Yeah, no, it's definitely unique.
Yeah, so I enjoyed that aspect of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, yeah, it would have been cool if it were a werewolf, like you said, if he had transformed into it. But yeah, you're not as an audience, you don't notice him the first time, and you're not
No.
meant to pick up any clues. They don't give you really any clues as to who it is or anything. It's not a mystery.
It's well done.
Not for the audience. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I found real fun about it, in terms of, like, so many horror movies, and it's not a bad thing, but so many horror movies are mysteries, and especially slashers and stuff. But
Right.
in general, most horror, not most, but a lot of horror movies can be mysteries in a way. You're trying to figure out who the killer is, or what is going on, or whatever. And this is too. As an audience member, you're kind of like, well, what is going on? There is a werewolf. Who could it be? Blah blah blah. And they don't really give you any clues as to it. They're not really trying to give you red herrings or anything with this movie. And so it's interesting that they do that. It's more about him. It's more about Jim Cummings' cop character and his unraveling around this whole thing. And that's what I found interesting about it. It wasn't just your typical horror movie. It was a character study of him with this horror aspect to it,
kind of element. Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, it is, I don't think it necessarily takes away from my overall feeling. I think I just like, I'm like, so like creature feature monster movies are like my second favorite subgenre of horror. So that's always what I'm going to want. I'm always going to want it to be like a real monster. But like, but I definitely think that this comes out of nowhere because we're on the other side of it. We're like, oh, it's definitely werewolf. And then, like you said, like he's constantly saying like, it's not. And then we get this moment where we're like, oh my God, it actually wasn't. Because like, but I think that that's a testament to how well this is done, in the sense that like you as the viewer, you're like, oh shit. Like I was so convinced that it was like a real werewolf. And so it affects like the feeling overall in a good way, because it shows how well that part of the film worked. So even though I would have liked for it to have been a real like man-eating wolf, I think that this does work in a unique sense, and it does kind of draw back to the focus on the characters and stuff, which I did really appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's and like we said, the comedy works really well in this. It's not that broad comedy; it's that uncomfortable kind of dark comedy to it, and the performances across the board are really good. Jim Cummings is really good. Ricky Lindholm, who plays the female deputy, she's really good in this. Like really understated as well. For her. Robert Forster, in one of his last roles, is excellent in the few scenes that he's in. And so he's fantastic in that. But
I don't think there's not like a single, even the people that aren't on for very long were really convincing. Like you got kind of a sense of like, oh, I know people like this, like, you just kind of they all felt very real. And I think a lot of times you see all kinds of films, not just like horror movies, but all kinds of movies. You see like there's going to be like the cast that really stands out, and there's going to be the cast that's like not really that great or just kind of mediocre. But I feel like everybody that had any performance on screen, they all delivered. It was perfect.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And this is and this is a fairly small budget, fairly independent movie as well. And from a creator I knew nothing about, but it doesn't feel like that. There's a lot of small independent movies that definitely feel that way. The quality is pretty low, not super low or anything like that, but they just feel independent,
where you could watch something and say, this is definitely an indie film, and then you go into this definitely looks like it was backed by a bigger production company, more money. I totally understand what you mean. I agree.
It just felt like it has that weird mixture of feeling like a small movie, but also feeling like a bigger budget. Both of these movies are like that. Both of these.
I totally agree. Yep.
So,
Yeah.
but it is interesting that you mentioned Josh Rubin, A Wounded Fawn, earlier, because he's actually the director of Werewolves Within.
Maybe
so,
okay. So I'm not crazy. I got that from
no.
somewhere. I got that name from somewhere, and I was like, okay, wait a second. Like,
I think, I just didn't make that connection when you did that earlier.
Okay. I was like,
yeah.
dang it. Did I just pull that out of like nowhere? Okay.
I didn't catch it when you mentioned it earlier, and then I was like, "Oh yeah, you know what? She was probably thinking of that."
I was. I bet. I knew he was involved in one of these movies.
Yeah.
I thought maybe both. I was like, maybe it's both. But then like I said, I don't pay attention to that stuff that well. Yeah. And so, but okay, that makes me feel so much better. I was over here like, wow, that's, yep.
So is there anything that you really didn't like about Wolf of Snow Hollow?
I don't really think I have very many complaints. I think it moves very much like a horror comedy, but I think that this, like we've talked about, with the way that this sense of humor is, I think it works really well. I don't really think I had anything that I would say I didn't like. Like I wasn't, I mean, obviously, like I talked about, it not being like a werewolf, but otherwise, I think that's probably it. Otherwise, I thought it was a really fun movie. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I watched it. It's definitely one I would probably revisit. I don't think I have anything to really complain about.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't either. I thought it was really well done. I think overall that it's just, it's a good, fun movie that, you got to know it's kind of a darker comedy, more than that broad comedy.
Yes.
I do think it pairs well with Werewolves Within.
I agree.
It's they may be different kinds of comedies, but they, again, going back to that, they're small towns and snowy locales, and they're both dealing with these mysteries. And that being said, we'll move on to Werewolves Within, directed by Josh Rubin, who I had on the show before. Go back and listen to that, listeners. It's this one I love. This one I think is one of my overall favorite werewolf movies. I like the broad comedy aspect of it. I like,
it's so funny.
Sam Richardson is great in this movie.
Agreed. Yep.
It's and I didn't know it was based on a video game when
I did.
I'm not a gamer per se. I know you are, so that's that's funny. But I didn't know about that aspect when I first heard about it and I first saw the trailers for it, but I was sold from the trailers alone. Just because I like a good horror comedy, and this fits that bill very well.
Oh my god.
And I'm glad to hear that you liked it. But what were your feelings on it overall?
Oh my god. So because I did know it was a horror comedy, I always try to go in like open-minded, because like I said, I'm irrationally hard on horror comedies. But within the first like the first 5 minutes, I was like laughing, and I was like, okay, so that's probably a pretty good sign. I think, the comedy, I laughed a lot in this one. This one I laughed pretty much from beginning to end. And there's just some things where you're just like one of the reasons that I'm really hard on horror comedies is because a lot of times the comedy either overtakes everything or it feels really, really forced. And I don't feel that that's the case with either of those is the case with this film. So I thought it was really, really, really funny. I liked, all of the characters. This was another example of like where you see characters, you're like, yep, these are real people. Like I know people like this. Like, and it's like, and it's like Trish is like the Karen of the group, and like I don't know, like you just meet all these people, and you're like, yeah, I literally have met someone, like every single one of these people. And like I was like, one of my favorite, I have so many favorite like lines and stuff, but like one of the things that made me laugh was like at the beginning, when Finn is in the car and he's like listening to that tape about how to be like more more like manly and more like all these things. And this old, it's got to be like a lady in her 80s doing the voice on this tape or CD or whatever. But she's like balls, balls, and she just like keeps saying it over. And I was like, I had to like pause it because I was laughing so hard. I was like, oh my god. It was so funny. The setup for it was so funny because he has like that moment where he leaves the voicemail. And then when he gets off the phone from the voicemail, he hits play and she's like saying that again. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was like, my cheeks hurt. I was laughing so hard. But yeah, I mean, aside from the comedy elements and I really like the characters, it's really smart in the horror parts too, because you don't really see a lot, but what you do see is really effective. And I like that they kind of also went this like, we're all going to turn on each other in times of crisis thing, because that's a very real, like, very real assessment of probably like, if things go wrong, this is what would actually happen. And I loved that too. I will say the only thing that is, I don't even know if I'm like upset about it, but I knew who it was pretty much from the beginning of the film, but I don't know how, like, is that like a big deal? I don't really know, because I don't think like the reveal wasn't really what I was watching it for. Once I got into it, it wasn't like I cared. I wanted to know, but it was more about just seeing what was going to happen with all these characters in this town. And so like, I don't know that I would even really say that's like a complaint. I just had a feeling and it ended up being right, but it didn't really take away from the experience. So, but yeah, this one was hilarious. I really loved this one.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, I know how hard you are on horror comedies.
Yeah.
So it's these
so
two.
And that was 2 wins.
Yeah, and that was what was funny about the whole situation too. Was like when we talked about doing these, you were like, yeah, I'll talk about these two. I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, but they're horror comedies. And like, I really hope she likes them. So,
yeah. Yeah, I did though. They were both really fun. I to be able to watch two essentially back to back and both enjoyed both of them, that's like unheard of. So it's a big deal for me.
There you go. Score 1 for me. I've got good taste. Right. And I can steer you towards good stuff.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it was a fun movie. I loved it.
Yeah. No, it's like, I agree. I think the characters are really well done. I think they're a lot more broad in terms of like, they are definitely characters. They're people you can know, but they're definitely playing these more broad stereotypes of these people.
Yes.
Not that they aren't nuanced, because they are, but they are much, much broader and much more played for the comedy of
Agreed.
It all.
Oh yeah.
And to your thing about knowing who it was beforehand, I didn't guess it, but I wasn't surprised also.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm the same way. Like, even if I guess something early on, it usually doesn't take away from the enjoyment of a movie, unless the getting there isn't that fun. And for me, like, I'm always going to bring up Malignant in that case, because I did not like Malignant. I knew what was going to happen from the opening credits, or at least I knew what the twist was from the opening credits.
Did you?
Yeah.
Didn't.
Because they kind of go through, like, there's this whole thing where the opening credits are going through and they're kind of flashing all this medical stuff up on the thing, and then I was like,
yeah, that's true.
And so I was just like, oh, I get it.
It was paranormal, so like like once I went in with that thought, I just stayed with it the whole film. So it's kind of different.
Yeah. And so for me, like, the getting to the reveal in Malignant wasn't fun. And so like, that movie just falls apart for me. It's like, and then when it does the reveal, and sure, it's crazy and it's weird and it's wild and everything, but I'm just like, it's not a movie for me. I need to rewatch it again, just to give it one more chance, just so I can say, for sure whether I didn't like it or not. But I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't hate on it, but it's just not a movie for me. But going back to this, where even if I had known early on, like you did, like you suspected at least, that it definitely would not have spoiled it for me, because
Agreed.
the getting there was so much fun.
So fun. Yeah.
Just all the, like you said, all the turning on each other, and they're all dealing with not just that, but they're dealing with the whole aspect of this pipeline coming through, and they are already like against each other because of that. You already had this setup of these people fighting each other over this pipeline coming in, and some of them want it so they can make money, and some of them don't want it because they're good people who don't care about that.
Yeah.
And so you already have this antagonism with each other before you introduce this werewolf element.
Yeah.
And and it's so funny too, because the werewolf isn't really picking them off one by one at all. It's more the werewolf introduces this element of themselves into it, and then everybody starts turning on each other
immediately
over it. And more than anything else, they all kill each other. And the werewolf doesn't barely have to do a thing. And that's what I thought was fun about that too, was this introducing this wild card into the mix, and then just have them all fight each other over it.
And that's because it's like, whenever, like, that's one of my favorite things about like zombie movies sometimes, is how they focus on like this human element of like, what would humans do to each other in times of crisis. And so this is obviously like a much like more comedic take on that situation, but right. I mean, they do, like, they start arguing, and then there's all these, and then like you've got the guy that's like, is his name, what's his name, Parker, the guy that's there for the pipeline.
Whatever. I can't remember his name offhand, but yeah.
But he's like when he opens the back of his car, and he's like got all that stuff, he's like been following this guy. You're like, what the, like, and I never once believed Stefan was the werewolf, but like, you get all these different versions of people turning on each other. And then what I did think was really funny. So a lot of times in situations where people are turning on each other in film, it even shows up in like the relationship side. But of the three people, or the three sets of people that were in and as a couple, there was really only the one set that argued, because the mechanic couple were like, I was laughing. There's like that one part after that one guy gets drug out of bed in the middle of the night, and like they're like arguing, like everybody's like freaking out in the hallway, and he says what he like, Finn says something, and she goes, oh, she's like, what is this, dumbass island? And then you hear her boyfriend go, dumbass island, you're so funny, babe. In the middle of this crisis. And I'm like, oh my God. And there's another time later where he compliments how smart she is. It's like literally in the middle of like the worst time to be giving your partner compliments. And then we have like the two gay guys that are like, they were really fine too. Like, I thought that was really interesting, because usually a lot of times couples turn on each other really fast too. But this didn't really go in that direction. It was more about creating like clusters of people together against everybody else, which I really liked. I thought that was really funny.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. Like, it's just like, and I've never played the video game. I don't know what, like, if this followed the video game in any way, shape, or form. It, like, I'm sure it's mostly, from what I understand, is that basically this just kind of follows the setup, that the characters weren't from the game or anything like that. It's just take the setup of what the game is and kind of plop a story on top of it. And so I agree with you. I thought it was funny. The mechanic couple's hilarious. Like, that's just like, they were just so dumb.
They really were.
Just, he comes running out like of the house later on, like he's got the Freddy knife fingers going on and everything, and then he runs out of the house into the street, and then gets completely smacked and killed by this truck backing up, and she's like, hey, get in the car, and just doesn't realize that she just smacked him with their truck.
And then she gets shot by the craft store lady. Oh my God, that part had me dying. I was laughing so hard. the setup for it was like not at all what you were thinking. Like, you know,
No,
he
and
runs out
it's
of the
so
house.
fast too.
It's so fast that you almost can't help but laugh. And then he gets hit, she gets shot, and they're like, well, we're going back inside.
And then
like,
she goes running in.
"This
Trish
is
goes
my
running in.
house."
She's like, that's my house. You guys are trespassing. I can kill you now.
That whole like 2-minute shot was like so ridiculously funny.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Man, that whole sequence is like just like man, like chef's kiss, man. It's just it's the timing and all the acting, everything. It's so good. You know, that's I just don't even know.
Yeah, it's hysterical, and there's a bunch of setups like that where it's like it kind of goes through like story mode where you're like, okay, so this is what's happening, and then it's like something big will happen, but it's like also really funny. It does that multiple times, and but yeah, that probably was one of the funniest scenes to me. It was probably that. I really laughed. I mean, just uncontrollably. Like, I was like, oh my God. It's like that and the balls part. It's like my favorite.
One of the parts I thought was funny is they're talking to the environmentalist lady through the door, and you know, she's like somebody is a lycanthrope, and they're all lycanthrope. They all start saying lycanthrope, and and they don't know what the word is or what it means, and then the pipeline guy's like werewolf, you know,
just like over it all.
Like they're a werewolf. And then, of course, you know, him being the hunter, the guy who's been hunting this werewolf along the way, he obviously knows the lore and everything. We find out that
which
little
makes
snippet
sense
later.
Yeah.
You know, but it's oh man, the performances in this are really great. It's really cool to see Harvey I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, Gian, maybe. He's from What We Do in the Shadows, the TV series.
He's hysterical. I laughed a lot.
He's great in this. He's so good in this. So it's nice to see him be in a werewolf movie and a vampire TV series.
Yeah. I haven't seen the series because, again, I knew it was a comedy, so I was kind of like, oh, but I may have to invest some time in it.
Give it a try. It's pretty fun. I mean, it's mockumentary style,
right?
So it's really fun if you can enjoy that aspect of it, enjoy the comedy of it. So
yeah, but, it sounds like, I mean, I've heard so many people talk about it. I'm certain I probably enjoy it. He had another part that was like one of the funniest for me, was like when they go into the house and he's like, Devin, but he's like kind of loud, and they're like, shh. He goes, oh, I'm sorry, I won't do that. And he goes, Devin, baby. He starts screaming and panic. I don't know why that was so funny to me, but it was. Like, because there's always one like person that doesn't know how to like keep their shit together. I thought that was really funny too. Yeah, I don't know. I honestly, like, I really laughed. I laughed so much during this movie, and it's like, I didn't know what to expect, but I wouldn't normally assume that I was going to go into something like this and find it as funny as I did. But yeah, this nailed it on the comedy front for sure.
That's good. I'm glad. Was there anything you didn't like about it?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. I don't think I had any complaints about this one either. I tend to have more complaints about more serious films, you know.
Right.
Like, I complain more about serious films that lose me. But I think because these are comedies, both of these films, I think that they kind of are, the way that you process them is so different than like a drama or like a gritty horror film. So I don't really think I had anything to complain. I mean, it did what it was meant to do. It made me laugh. And I think that, you know, it's the pieces. I mean, I am obviously glad it was a real werewolf at the end.
Yes. And what did you think of that? Like, you know, not the reveal necessarily, but like the style of werewolf. Of course, we get it's a humanoid wolf again, more human than wolf this time. I think, you know, it's more of the Wolfman style of werewolf. Just kind of the person with werewolf. Like fur on their face.
Yeah, well, and it almost, like, to me, like like almost like a not finished transition, because like she's in the middle of changing and she gets hit by a shovel by the guy from out in the woods. No, I was fine with it. I think the only type of werewolf I don't like is the one that looks like normal wolves, because not that they're not that, like, if I'm out in the wilderness, I won't be, but if I was, like, if I'm out in the wilderness and I came across real wolves, I would be scared 100%, but I don't like them in my werewolf movies. I want them to be monsters. I want them to be this weird mix of the two, like, and that's like, that's what I want in my werewolf movies. And so, like, I really liked, that there was a little bit of a transformation. I think I don't know, I didn't look at what the budget was for this, but I think sometimes, like we talked about, like not showing a lot. I think that was really wise. To save this all until kind of the last minute, because we also get that flashback of her when they were back at the lodge place and after she had just attacked that guy, and we get just like a very short glimpse, nothing crazy. But I thought all of that was well done, and we don't really get to see a lot of her as the wolf, which I think was also really smart, because again, by this point, like, that's not really why we're watching at that point.
Right.
So I think that saved the focus on, like, well, does this wolf transformation work for me? Because I just enjoyed it. I wasn't really paying attention, other than the fact that, I did like that it wasn't like a normal looking world, or a normal looking wolf. I don't prefer those, but I thought that was good. It seems like they chose their moments very carefully with that part, which I really appreciate. Better to show a little and let us fill in the gaps than to show too much and ruin it. So I think it was really well done.
Yeah, and this one being more of a straight up actual mystery, it was more kind of this is kind of like Clue, like in that way. You've got all these wild characters, you're all stuck in one location, you're all suspecting each other, but I do agree, like like we said with the other one, it's great when you can see the creature, and I don't begrudge any of the movies, and like I don't want people to think I'm like being shitty to people who with low budgets or anything, and I get why they do that. But I think that, like you said, this one did it really well, because the werewolf aspect of it was a mystery. I mean, you are the whole mystery of it is supposed to be like which one of them is the werewolf, and so it makes sense to kind of hold back on not just the reveal, but also any look at the werewolf up until that point.
Because we don't see anything. It's just bodies, like body parts. And I think, and I was like, when I was watching this, I kind of like decided that this was like what would happen if like Shaun of the Dead and 30 Days of Night had a baby, but it was like werewolves instead of vampires. Because there's so many things that make me, first of all, the shots, the way this is shot is very Shaun of the Dead. The abrupt, like, I don't know what you'd call that, but like where they abruptly switch to these short, very short clips. It's like, this happens, this happens, this happens. That's very Shaun of the Dead. And I'm sure there's other films like that too, but I just immediately go to Shaun of the Dead. The getting held up in one location made me think of that. Then the nighttime in the snow and the monster part of it, and kind of made me feel like 30 Days of Night. That's one of my favorite like vampire movies. But like, I just felt like that's what would happen if they got together and like had a baby and it was like about werewolves. It would be this film, because this was very Shaun of the Dead. I would be very surprised if there wasn't an influence there, because, and that's not a complaint. I think it's well done. As it, maybe if it was an inspiration, it's definitely not like a knock. But I love Shaun of the Dead. That's another horror comedy that I really love. So I think that's one of the reasons this works so well for me too.
Yeah, no, I agree. I didn't think about either one of those when watching it, but I can see what you're saying about that. And I agree with the the werewolf stuff. And I agree wholeheartedly about, like like I said earlier, I like humanoid wolves. I hate when it's just a wolf. I feel like that's such a cheap cop out, even if it's a big wolf like it is in American Werewolf in London. And I like American Werewolf in London, except for the fact that he's just a giant wolf. Other than that, like, I enjoy the movie, but I really like
big, like over the top monster,
and where they're standing on the hind legs, and it's just and you feel like it's a person transformed like into a wolf of some sort, and so It's just that to me is more fun. It's more menacing. It's like, because don't get me, like you said, a wolf by itself is scary, and like I would not want to be like
In real
crossing
life. Yeah.
paths with a wolf in real life or anything
Yeah.
like that. But one that was the size of a man and on its hind legs, and attacking you,
That's scary.
that's a whole nother level of scary.
It
So
is. Yeah.
so
Totally
it's
agree.
and that's why I enjoy that so much more, especially because if you can do a really great costume design for
Mm-hmm.
that, and pull it off, which seems to be fairly rare in the werewolf genre.
Oh,
Um,
I know.
yeah.
And it's
It's just like
hard when you love werewolves because you're like you
I
want there to
yeah,
be more content where like and I like as much as I liked these were great, these were very fun and entertaining and I laughed a lot, but I do want more like gritty like werewolf films. Is that like
yeah,
like there seems to be this like ridiculous thought process that like the only way werewolves can be successful is if we mix them with vampires, if we mix them with like they have their own lore and you guys are not utilizing what's there to be creative and create something new and it
right,
sucks
yeah,
because there's a lot that can be done. There was a werewolf movie that came out last year called The Cursed, and it was a
yeah,
really really unique werewolf film. I mean it had some very like generic stuff that was very like
right,
Wolfman, but there was a lot of things about it that were really unique and I'm like, see, I was like, you just got to think outside the box. Werewolf movies can be scary and effective and cool and unique. You just got to think outside the box and outside of these
right,
limitations that you also need vampires because you don't, and that there can
right.
only be this one style. So I want more like that. I want more monster wolves.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there that like you said, there's enough lore out there, that
Mm-hmm.
you can mine and you can make it your own
Yep.
without combining it with something else, and with making it, and and make it fun and interesting. And like with
Mm-hmm.
these two movies,
Yeah.
you can make a really good werewolf suit, that works really well on camera. It's
Yeah.
I it's like I can't imagine the budget for Snow Hollow was really that high. But
Right.
whatever their budget was, they put into that wolf costume. And
Yeah.
you look at the behind the scenes, and sure, you can tell it's a suit in the behind the scenes, with the lights all high and everything like that. It but that's what the great lighting and camera work is about, is to give
Yeah.
us that full look at it. But you know put it in that, you use the camera, use the lighting, make it menacing and interesting in that way as well. um
Yeah. It's yeah,
so
because to your point, it's not just about the suit, it's about what you can do around it to make it more effective. Yeah.
right, and then not hide it either, with just
Yep.
the you know
Game
and I'm not
plan.
saying that you have to show it constantly, like
No, because then
definitely
it's too much.
part. Yeah, then it's
Yeah.
too much, yeah.
Yeah.
But but show it once in a while, and
Yeah.
give us some good looks at it, not just glimpses at a snout or a claw or something like that.
Yes.
Which, and again, I'm not trying to like shit on the movies that do that,
No, I know what you're
but it's just
saying
like,
though.
I don't know, like find out who made the really good, suits, and like talk to them and figure out what you can do. Um, and I get, like, if you're going to be on a very small budget, then do it in a unique and fun way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that Werewolves Within did that. Like, their budget was probably pretty small too, and that's why
Hmm.
they only got to her mid transformation and all that. But that was still fun.
It works. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
worked. It worked well, and it was fun and different and fit that tone as well. You know,
Yeah.
whereas Snow Hollow was, this weird, like, not weird in a bad way, but this weird mix of kind of taking something serious and more horrific and mixing it with this darker comedy. And
Hmm.
where Werewolves Within was like, well, much broader comedy. It was more like this. Werewolves Within was definitely more comedy than horror. But I definitely don't think it cheaped out on the horror either. We got some nice gore, we got some nice
Yeah.
jumps and everything. So
Moments. Yeah. No, I totally
yeah.
agree.
So it's
Yeah.
both of these movies are both really really well done. And like, it's nice to see that I think this was Wolf of Snow Hollows was Jim Cummings' second movie and direct second movie he directed, and this was Josh Rubin's Werewolves with Them was Josh Rubin's second movie he directed as well. So nice nice movies to have early on in your careers. So
yeah, I agree.
So, and I own both of them because I was just like on physical, because I was just like, I have to have both of these. They're both too cool to not have. So
yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say specifically about either of these movies that we haven't already said?
No, I think we covered everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So that being said, where can people find you online?
Everywhere. I'm on, well, my main content is on YouTube, and that's just Voices from the Mausoleum. And then everything else that, I'm on Twitter, it's @FromMausoleum. Instagram is Voices from the Mausoleum. TikTok is Voices FTM, and so is Facebook. And I think that's everything. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely go check her stuff out. She puts out a lot of stuff on YouTube, and it's all fun. She's got different series running at all times, like Found Footage Fridays, and you got your new morning show going.
Video game adaptations. If you're a horror video game fan, Kat Velour and I are talking about those currently. Yeah. And Kat Velour's been on my show a couple of times, so definitely, go check that out. They're both great. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again. I loved having you on. We'll have to get you on again for some more. Yeah. Super fun.
Thanks again to Angel for joining me. Next week, we begin a new series of episodes on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise on Monday with Kat Hughes joining me to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and the 2010 remake. And on Friday is the start of my new series of geeky episodes. Every Friday, I will be joined by a guest to talk about comic book movies and series. And to start things off, we are hitting the ground running on the Marvel Cinematic Universe and starting at the beginning with Iron Man. Donna from the Dawn of the Dead podcast returns to talk all about it. Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by donating to the Ko-fi page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.